analyzed Fazbear Entertainment's ridiculous lawsuits and violations to see just how many they've gotten over the years and how much it would cost them, with me only having my grad-level science classes to thank for teaching me how to drudge through the mounds of research, aka potential lawsuits that are really heating up to fry this company, as we now get into the next part of Fazbear Entertainment's story. With William being sealed away inside the restaurant's now hidden room, Fazbear Entertainment seemed to be done. All of the lawsuits and countless safety violations were now a thing of the past. That is, until they came back stronger than ever. Specifically, these Fazbear lawsuits can be split into two main categories, being criminal and civil. In civil cases, a company like Fazbear or individual like William would be held accountable to the victim or their family if the victim is deceased, and if found guilty would owe them monetary damages covering the person's medical bills or funeral costs, financial support equal to the value now lost to them not being able to work, and value equal to the loss of the person's now diminished guidance, care, and parenting if they have surviving children, along with any punitive damages that the person or company being sued would have to pay on top of everything else just for committing a wrong or offense. Specifically for a company like Fazbear, they would be sued even in the face of them saying lines like, "Fazbear is not responsible for death or dismemberment," as this is being said despite the fact that employees are not expecting to be attacked by neglected and possessed animatronics, some that are clearly decked out for murder while on the job, which would absolutely not stand in court and would see Fazbear getting sued for a lot. Then we have the many criminal charges that, as we saw before, would see Fazbear's high-ranking members and involved employees answering to the government, being punished via prison, while also facing a mountain of civil lawsuits at the same time. To keep the complicated timeline simple, we will be following the one painstakingly laid out by the game theorists, but either way, we will be compiling the lawsuits that Fazbear and its members would be facing in each of these instances. Now that William was trapped inside his Spring Bonnie suit, inside a walled-off room, time went on. Henry disappeared, effectively avoiding a second-degree murder charge, with William's last remaining child, Michael, noticing that, despite the distance between him and his father, it had been an awfully long time since he had been gone. Michael soon discovered William's underground laboratory right inside of their own home, and upon finding the many animatronics down there, like Circus Baby, who was now inhabited by the soul of his deceased sister, realized what his father had been up to, right before falling victim to the many animatronics who used his body to escape. And where Michael should have died, he instead lived on as a sort of rotting corpse thanks to him coming into contact with a special life-preserving substance known as Remnant. And despite William being missing or dead, Michael could still totally sue, specifically for a personal injury suit, where after William's assets, like his heaping bank account, are divided to pay off any remaining debts and inheritances to any beneficiaries, which in this case is just Mike, or him and his mother Clara if she is still alive. So heck, Mike doesn't even have to sue. If William is presumed dead, then all of his money and even ownership of Afton Robotics would fall to him. And now that Mike knew what kind of monster his father was, possibly connecting him to the many deaths of the missing children over the years, and even that of his own sister, he had to stop the animatronics. He had to put an end to Fazbear Entertainment that had become a sponge for the souls of dead kids. He even needed to stop his father, who still might be out there. So Mike soon began taking up jobs at the remaining Fazbear pizza chain restaurants as the night security guard, checking them out for dangerous robots and burning them to the ground. And if Mike was hopping from restaurant to restaurant lighting them on fire, then this is clearly the state crime known as first-degree arson, which is the criminal act of deliberately setting fire to property, specifically being a building for it to be first degree. And this is classified as a Class 3 felony in some states, being punishable by 4 to 12 years in prison and a fine between $3,000 to $750,000. And luckily, no one is in the building for Mike to be additionally charged with first-degree murder. But if he has been setting fire to multiple or possibly a dozen or more restaurants, each of these these would be charged as an individual count. And if convicted on multiple accounts of first-degree arson, at the very least, Mike would be paying a far heftier fine to Fazbear Entertainment that may add up somewhere in the millions, if not tens of millions of dollars, along with additional prison time. And on top of that, if Mike used explosives to start the fires, then in some states this is considered a crime of violence, which would result in a mandatory prison sentence of around 10 to 32 years for a single count, and all the fines we discussed. Mike, however, was never found out, and one day, presumably 30 years after his father's disappearance, saw that Fazbear, in an attempt to make some money off of the horror stories that surrounded their name, decided to open up a new location, a new business that ran as a horror attraction called Fazbear Frights. Mike, partially disgusted and fed up with the whole thing, quickly applied for the night guard position and got the job. Upon entering the building, the place itself looked eerie and was filled with minor knickknacks from the company's past, but nothing substantial. And after days of being on the job, it seemed to just be a dead end, until he got the call he had been waiting for, that a Fazbear team had discovered the very room that Henry had sealed off in secret all those years ago, and to their joy finding an old animatronic inside of it that they were now going to place inside of Fazbear Frights, and finally make this business some real money. Upon working the next night shift, Mike finally saw him, his father, roaming the halls in his iconic yellow Bonnie suit, and seeing how this place was currently yet to open, this very likely saved Fazbear the problem of William likely killing any of the customers who came in, which would see Fazbear swimming in a sea of wrongful death charges due to their negligence. Wrongful death denoting a civil action in which monetary damages are sought against a party whose negligence caused a death to occur. That typically results in a lot of money being fined, and despite whether or not Mike commits another act of first-degree arson, this location may not even make it far enough for Fazbear to put anyone in danger, including Mike the Night Guard. As looking at Fazbear Frights' business, we immediately see a few problems. You see, when operating any business like a haunted house, the establishment has to be inspected by a state inspector to make sure it holds up to numerous building, fire, and safety codes, with everything receiving a fairly thorough inspection by state inspectors. State inspectors who often go through the attraction themselves to see everything that the customer will encounter and experience. And these inspections include making sure that everything in the building, including props and decorations, are fire retardant, that there is essentially minimal to zero fire risk as possible. They also check to make sure that there is good sprinkler coverage in case of fire, that there is nothing inherently dangerous to customers, like the extremely old and sharp vintage fan they find, that there's no electrical wires hanging out, that there's easily identifiable exit signs, with there being exits at least every 50 feet, and listening to the call from the employer, he specifically acknowledges that much of what they have is so old that it is barely functional. Things like the metal fan, that is also likely a fire hazard, could also inflict harm on customers, says himself that they could potentially have a fire break out, and looking around we see one, maybe two easily identifiable exits, as well as metal wires hanging all over that may likely be decorations or potential hazards. And even if we assume that most of the props are safe, and that things like Foxy's hook, which is just sitting out in the open, aren't made out of metal that someone could easily be injured with, the yellow Bonnie suit with a rotting corpse inside of it would easily see a state inspector shutting this place down. On the other hand, if this yellow Bonnie animatronic did attempt to hurt Mike while on the job, which it does, usually Mike would only be allowed to obtain workers' compensation for his injuries, only being able to sue Fazbear if a more extreme exception has occurred. And seeing how Fazbear allowed such an animatronic with a body still inside of it, inside of their own building, with the courts likely being aware that this is not the first case of an animatronic attacking somebody, and that this animatronic was just dropped on top of Mike after he already took the job, all of this is likely to convince a court that this is an extreme exception, and this would allow Mike to possibly sue Fazbear for a special form of negligence called gross negligence, which is a more serious form of negligence that would allow Mike to possibly get Fazbear shut down, allowing Mike to sue Fazbear for anywhere around $250,000 $100,000, if not up to several million dollars, along with even more punitive damages possibly being placed on top of that. After finding his father, Mike soon rigged the wiring to set fire to the building, leaving with one final act of first-degree arson and a healthy conscience. Also seeing the security puppet possessed by Henry's daughter Charlie, putting the spirits of Afton's victims to rest, as Mike finally put his father and his heinous crimes to rest, and finally shut down Fazbear's last attempt at clawing their way back. Except, it didn't work. As much as playing this research game has me cringing even more at a few things I heard and saw, as the outside ninja movement program director guy who helped different, sometimes gymnastic facilities build up their own ninja programs, Fazbear is far from being out of the weeds. William Afton somehow still clung to whatever life remained inside of him, making it out of the burning building. And besides that, other animatronics like his sister Circus Baby were still on the loose, out wandering, looking for kids that they could eagerly take out, as William programmed them to do. But help soon arrived from someone Mike didn't expect to come back, being William's old partner Henry. Henry, who had come up with a plan to take out all of the remaining animatronics at once, including his old business partner, and being the only person capable of reviving the Fazbear restaurant business, came up with the idea of turning Fazbear's into a franchise, giving others the license and right to open up new Fazbear pizza restaurants, while at the same time giving himself the freedom to work in the background, taking advantage of the animatronics' murderous programming to lure them back to the restaurant one by one. After some initial advertising, Henry soon selected one individual to manage his first new Fazbear pizza restaurant, being Mike, who had quickly applied. And this is where the lawsuits begin to really stack up for Fazbear Entertainment, as Mike sees to building up the entire restaurant literally from the ground up, buying and decorating the place with all manner of party equipment, animatronics, discount ball pits, paper plates, play equipment, this thing, some of which come anywhere from low to extreme liability risks for the company. Specifically, the liability risks we're talking about is the type that is operational risks, that holds the company accountable for any action that they do, like putting in a giant ball pit or a faulty animatronic, or even their inactions to fix a problem that could be used against them in a civil claim. While there are several types of liability risk, many of the customers in some cases can file a lawsuit against the business in what is called a claim for strict liability, while often these customers could just make a claim for negligence. If instead they file a liability lawsuit against Fazbear for faulty and or outright dangerous service, they can really stick it to them, as strict liability laws exist to protect the public health and safety. So in these cases, the customer merely has to show that Fazbear just has faulty and dangerous equipment on hand and does not have to go so far as to prove that Fazbear was negligent in causing someone harm, even if putting in something like a ball pit was good intentioned on Fazbear's part. That information becomes irrelevant. And if Fazbear is found guilty, this could see them paying out monetary damages, as the game shows, in hundreds to thousands of dollars, but can get up to be way more. But despite whatever lawsuits may have come his way, Mike continued on and did everything Henry asked of him, like keeping a lookout for any animatronics that may have come wandering in outside the restaurant, and going so far as to salvage them, effectively taking them from the back alley and placing them somewhere inside the restaurant. And Mike quickly catched on to the fact that something was up, finding Molten Freddy, a rather unique animatronic named Lefty, his father William, and even his sister Circus Baby, who still was just trying to make her father proud. As the remaining animatronics appeared one by one, it wasn't before long that Mike caught on to Henry's plan, that he created the building as a means of luring all of the animatronics to one single location to end the nightmare once and for all. Cause as soon as all of the animatronics were accounted for, Henry enacted the final part of his plan, closing off all the exits as the walls literally closed in around them. All the while, the restaurant was rigged to suddenly burst into flames everywhere at once, in an attempt to swiftly lay the animatronics to rest, along with his old business partner, as Mike willingly remained trapped inside, determined to let the remnant lingering letting inside of him go with everything else. As great of an end to the possessed animatronics as this may have been, the remains of Fazbear Entertainment would be in some trouble if the fire was proven to be deliberately caused by, say, Henry, who recorded the entire thing, and even if a court didn't find that, but was able to find that he was responsible for rigging and thus causing a fire to occur in the business that killed another person, specifically being Mike, the franchise owner, that the court may or may not know wanted to stay there and burn with everything else, as it's likely that his remains would be found along with Henry's. Henry, the owner and creator of Fazbear Entertainment, having committed a thoroughly planned out first-degree murder, now being deceased, could possibly see his company Fazbear Entertainment being liable for paying out monetary damages to any remaining kin of the Afton family, like the mother Clara or other relatives, in amounts upwards to hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. This is, though, if an inspector didn't find the fact that part of the location was built like a labyrinth with vents that wind all over the place that didn't actually connect to the main area with odd metal walls, and discover whatever flammable engineering Henry had built into the building, ensuring that he could erupt the whole place into flames in a moment's notice, showing that this place did not follow their many different codes, causing the entire restaurant to get shut down well before it ever opened. But if none of this was very interesting, then I saved an interesting fact for last. You know those waivers you sign when entering a trampoline park or anywhere big, where the company doesn't want you to sue them for injury? By signing these waivers when you say order an animatronic from a delivery service or enter into a giant amusement space, these things apply when it comes to ordinary negligence on the part of the customer who may have acted recklessly, resulting in their own injury. However, these things are void and cannot excuse the individual or company who made you sign it from acting recklessly, having gross negligence, and committing intentionally wrongful acts. As the next time, we will get into what will likely be the biggest lawsuits Fazbear faces with its nationwide fun time delivery service and its giant mega pizzaplex. See you in the next one.